Welcome back to our Read Aloud 5th grade friends. We are going to finish Chapter 1 today in our book, The Dumbest Crooks Hall of Shame. Remember, Chapter 1 was the Failing to Use Common Sense, or the Witless Wonder Award. We were about halfway through the first chapter, so if you missed that first chapter, go to the previous Read Aloud before we start. But if you're all caught up, here we go, and let's get started. This person was titled Apple Picker, and this was a theft. You've heard the expression, what goes around comes around? Some call it karma. After this ethics-challenged teen stole an iPhone, he had it stolen from him. But rather than chalk it up as a business loss, the moron went to the police. Want to guess how that worked out for him? In big cities like New York, thieves have been snatching iPhones right out of the hands of vulnerable victims in a crime dubbed apple picking. One day in 2013, in New York's Prospect Park, a teenage boy in pink tennis shoes grabbed an iPhone 4S from a 16-year-old girl and ran off with it. She reported the theft to 2 police officers from the 78th Precinct who were in a squad car. Now here's where the karma comes into play. Shortly after the theft, the boy tried to sell the iPhone to a man on the street. The man then did to the boy what the boy had done to the girl. He yanked it out of the teen's hands and sprinted away with it. Here's where the stupidity comes into play. Rather than admit to himself that he was a thief who got what was coming to him, our Hall of Shamer viewed himself as a victim. He wanted justice. So he flagged down a police car and reported that a man had stolen his iPhone 4S. The boy conveniently forgot to mention that he himself had originally stolen it from a girl. The cops found the man who had grabbed the iPhone from the boy and detained him. Then they brought the 2 of them to the 7th Precinct station house for further questioning. Meanwhile, the victimized girl was still with the officers from the 78th Precinct. One of them called the girl's phone and, pretending to be its owner, asked the person who answered to return it. The person on the other end was actually an officer from the 70th Precinct who was still quizzing the boy and the man. A minute into the conversation, the 2 officers identified themselves to each other. Realizing that the so-called victim in the station house was most likely a thief himself, the cops came up with a plan. The officers from the 78th brought the girl to the 70th Precinct station, where she pointed to the boy in pink tennis shoes as the culprit. She proved the phone was hers by punching in the pin to unlock it. The boy, who still claimed the phone was his, was unable to unlock it. Officers returned the phone to its rightful owner and arrested the thief and the thief who stole it from the thief. As for the teenage culprit, well, he learned that karma is like a rubber band. You can stretch it only so far before it comes back and smacks you. This is another burglary titled Cab Cads. Memo to burglars. Hiring a taxi as your getaway car isn't smart. But if you're dumb enough to do it anyway, never stiff the driver. Not paying the cabbie means you will suffer an unwanted payback. That certainly was the case for these 2 buffoons in Monmouth County, New Jersey. According to the Deal, New Jersey Police Department, 2 suspects hailed a taxi in an Asbury Park and directed the driver to a house in Deal late one night in 2016. When they arrived at the address, they told the cabbie to wait. They went inside the residence and emerged several minutes later with a television and several bottles of liquor. They got into the cab and had the driver take them to the front of their apartment building in Asbury Park. Their plan had worked to perfection. Now all they had to do was pay the cabbie fare, and he would be on his way, apparently oblivious to the crime that they had just committed. But no. After getting out of the taxi with their stolen items, the 2 goons refused to pay the driver and left him fuming mad. Not smart. They had just angered the one person who had the addresses of the house they had just burglarized and their own residence. Not surprisingly, the cabbie called the police. After law enforcement officers confirmed that the house in Deal had been broken into, they went to the address in Asbury Park, where they arrested the 2 burglars who were in possession of the stolen TV and liquor bottles. The items were returned to the homeowner. The suspects were taken to Monmouth County Jail and charged with burglary, conspiracy to commit burglary, criminal trespass, and theft. As for the taxi driver, turnabout is fair play. Get it? Fair, because it's fair, and the taxi fare is what they pay. Love these homophone jokes in this book. The next one is tattooed dude, another burglary. Sporting disinfective tattoos on your face and neck makes a statement and often draws attention. That can be good, unless you're a burglar. If you don't want to be easily identified, you might want to rethink that body ink. The thought likely didn't cross the mind of this 25-year-old lame brain from Green Acres, Florida. He had a tattoo of the outline of the state of Florida inked into his temple by his left eye, and the word red drum, which is murder spelled backwards, drawn on the left of his neck. Those aren't common everyday tattoos. It didn't take the cops long to identify the suspect who broke into a house in 2016 near West Palm Beach, Florida, and stole 2 watches and a handgun. Surveillance video clearly showed a burglar with tats of Florida and red drum on the left side of his face and neck, respectively. The homeowner told police he recognized the intruder on the video from his tattoos. The suspect was the friend of the victim's former roommate, who had been to the residence before. Investigators used a tattoo database from the Palm Beach County Jail and driver's license records and matched them to the burglar who had been released from prison after serving 8 months of a year-long sentence for felony gun and robbery convictions. For the break-in, the Tat Rat was arrested on charges of burglary, grand theft, and possession of a weapon by a felon. Yep, thanks to those tattoos, he had guilt written all over him. Get it? Because tattoos are written and guilt written. Oh, okay. This one is titled ID Idiot, and it's a phony bomb threat. For most people, caller ID is a helpful convenience, not so much for criminals. In 2014 in Hayden, Idaho, this 25-year-old fugitive was holed up inside his home because he knew that members of the North Idaho Violent Crimes Task Force were outside, staking out his residence. The officers, who weren't sure he was home, had a warrant for his arrest. He needed a plan to escape, but how could he get past the cops? Then it dawned on him. He would call in a phony bomb threat to his school, which would divert officers to the scene. That way he could flee. Brilliant! Or so he thought. Early in the afternoon, he called Atlas Elementary Schools in Hayden and said someone had placed a bomb there. Within minutes, students and staff were evacuated from the campus while law enforcement officers from the Coontapai County Sheriff's Office, Coeur-d'Alene Police Department, and Idaho State Police responded, along with crews from Northern Lakes Fire, according to radio station KXLY. Authorities swept the interior and exterior of the school without finding any devices, so students and staff were allowed back on campus. Unfortunately for the fugitive, he suffered an identity crisis. You see, police already knew who was responsible for the bomb hoax. When the dimwit had phoned in the phony threat, he had forgotten to block his caller ID, so his phone number had shown up on the call. Much to his chagrin and authorities' delight, the number was easily traced to his landline at his home. His plan to con police with a fake bomb threat blew up and left a lasting impression on him, because he had unwittingly confirmed to members of the task force that he was still at home. Moments later, they barged inside and arrested him on an unrelated felony charge, as well as new charges for making a false report of a bomb at a school and obstructing an officer. Thanks to caller ID, the dope made a name for himself. This next one is called Return Mail, and it's grand larceny. Seasoned crooks know that one of the most important rules in lawbreaking is don't return to the scene of the crime and try to commit it again, especially minutes later. Not being a seasoned crook, this chump didn't know that rule, or have common sense. In 2012, the 28-year-old dunce of the day from East Syracuse, New York, which is ironically where I lived right before moving to Astoria, went into a branch of Alliance Bank in Syracuse and demanded $20,000 from a teller. At first, the teller refused because this would-be robber never showed a weapon or made a threat. He just kept insisting that he wanted 20 grand. Finally, the teller, who was worried that the situation could spiral out of control, caved and put cash in a bag and gave it to him. As the perp hurried out of the bank with the money, the teller summoned police. When the robber was in a safe place, he looked in the bag and counted the money. To his outrage, he discovered the teller had shortchanged him big time. There wasn't anything close to the $20,000 that he had demanded. There was only $1,100. He felt he had been cheated, and he planned to do something about it. So against all conventional criminal wisdom, he marched back to Alliance Bank determined to collect the rest of the money. But the front door was locked, and the police were inside investigating. Nevertheless, he still knocked, so they opened the door, saw he was the perp, and arrested him. A year later, he pled guilty in court to fourth-degree grand larceny and was sentenced to a year in prison. Perhaps if he had thought twice about it, he wouldn't have gone twice to the bank. It led to nothing but diminishing returns. The next one is Pizza Man, first-degree robbery. There's one thing we know for sure about this nut bar. He's no criminal genius. How else to explain why he would phone in an order to a pizza joint and give his address, and then, when it arrived at his home, assist in robbing the delivery driver of all his pizzas and money? This pizza scheme didn't pan out. In about as much time as it took for pizza to arrive, the bonehead was arrested by officers from the Tuscaloosa Police Department in Alabama in 2014. Sergeant Brent Blankley told the Tuscaloosa News that the driver went to a mobile home one night to deliver a pizza that had been ordered from that address. When he knocked on the door, several men armed with handguns demanded all his money, all the pizzas in his car, and his wallet. The driver did what he was told, but made sure to get a good look at them. Then the robbers fled. After police were alerted, officers went to the mobile park and asked residents if they knew anyone who matched the descriptions given by the victim. The neighbors all mentioned the dude who lived in the mobile home where the driver was sent to deliver the pizza. Officers went to the residence and encountered the 20-year-old suspect who had returned to his home. He matched the driver's description. A search of his mobile home turned up the stolen pizzas and the warming bag they were in. He was charged with first-degree robbery, while his buddies were being sought on a similar charge. Blankley told the newspaper, "We don't typically see a suspect call a delivery driver to their actual address to commit a robbery. The culprit had an address problem that the police addressed." This is Tug Thug, attempted burglary. What can you say about a crook who can't read signs? Maybe he's too dense for a life of crime. Or maybe he was born under a bad sign, out to lunch. A surveillance camera at the Shambles Bar in Chicago showed what happened when this bumbling burglar became increasingly frustrated after he kept tugging and tugging at an unlocked door that wouldn't open. Bar owner Joe Lynn and WBBM TV reporter Mike Parker watched 7 minutes of video of the Stooges' attempted burglary in 2014. "He's looking through the glass to see if anyone's there inside," said Lynn. "He has a tool, so he's obviously prepared and done it before." Within 2 minutes, the burglar destroys the lock. Now, it should be easy to open the door. Over and over again, he pulls on the door with all his might. The jarring knocks over a security bar planted inside against the glass door. He continues to pull and tug, but mystifyingly, at least to him, he still can't get it to open. After 5 minutes of struggle, he finally gives up and leaves. The dunderhead would have easily entered through the door, if only he had noticed the one-word sign on it that said, "Push." I love when people can't read push and push runs. It's very funny. The next one is called Gumby Dummy, attempted robbery. "Hey, crooks, don't bother robbing a convenience store dressed up as Gumby. You not only will look like a fool, you actually will be a fool. Learn from this numbskull who, while in a full-size Gumby costume, suffered a cartoonish fail while trying to rob a 7-Eleven in the San Diego, California suburb of Rancho Penasquicos one night in 2011. An accomplice had driven him there after the wannabe robber had donned the bulky head, two-toe green costume with a famous claymation human-like character. When this Gumby walked into the store, he announced he had a gun and demanded the store clerk give him all the money in the cash register. The clerk found it hard to take Gumby seriously. After all, what criminal dresses up like that? Believing it was all a bad joke, the annoyed clerk said he was cleaning up and didn't have time for such nonsense. Detective Gary Hassan of the San Diego Police Department told KGTV. According to Hassan, Gumby told the clerk, "You don't think this is a robbery? I have a gun." Gumby, whose hands were covered by thick green gloves, fumbled inside his costume as if trying to retrieve something. Instead of pulling out a gun, if he even had one, he carelessly dropped 27 cents on the floor. Looking at the store surveillance video later, Hassan said Gumby can't pick up the money and he can't get the gun. The lunkhead's accomplice then pulled up in a minivan in front of the store and honked. Gumby left the store in defeat and got into the vehicle, which took off into the night. And the last story for this chapter is called El Pollo Loco, breaking and entering. Maybe if burglars had a dress code, like wearing only black with a ski mask, they wouldn't suffer the same fate as this doofus. In the early morning hours of 2014, the crook broke into an El Pollo Loco in Costa Mesa, California. The restaurant's security camera caught him ransacking the eatery while looking for cash. Not finding any money, he left. When employees arrived, they looked at the video and saw that the burglar was wearing a bright green shirt and a neon and black hat with a picture of Animal, a character from the Muppets. Later the same day, our Hall of Shamer had a hankering for some Mexican fire-grilled chicken. Where should he go? Yes, of course, the place he broke into hours earlier, El Pollo Loco in Costa Mesa. So he did. Oh darn, he forgot to do the one thing before he went to the restaurant. Change his clothes. So when he went up to the counter to order, the employees noticed he was wearing a bright green shirt and an animal cap just like the burglar had on in the surveillance video. The workers wondered, what are the odds that the customer would be wearing the exact same things as the burglar? There's not a number high enough. They called the cops, who came and arrested the suspect before he had a chance to eat his grill-fried meal. No winner, chicken dinner for him. And that, friends, brings us to the end of the first chapter in Dumb Crooks Hall of Shame. There was some pretty interesting ones there. Tune into our next Read Aloud to see what our next chapter is going to be about. I'm Mr. Lures for my friend Big Bear. Have a good day, friends.